Hi, Mark. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Have you just got back from being on tour with New Order?
Yeah, I was in Japan with New Order.
How's that?
Yeah, brilliant, of course. Like you're playing in front of that massive Japanese crowd. Yeah, and yeah, I was just a warm up DJ. Just setting the atmosphere right for their gig. It was good. I had a
Are,
really good time.
are they very popular over in Japan then?
Yeah, huge. Yeah, yeah, they are. Yeah, very, very popular. Yeah, I mean the places were like 15,000 seater venues.
Well, we'll go back to the start for you, really. What was life like for you growing up in Manchester?
What was life like growing up in Manchester? Dismal, kind of hard. I mean, I come from a very, very, very working class family, and we lived on the periphery of Manchester in a council house. Yeah, there weren't that many kind of like prospects for the future by the time it came to leaving school. Luckily, I had a job. I had a part-time job in Virgin, and I got the job as an advertising graphic design agency because that's what I thought I wanted to be. But I was being the youngest. I got always the crappy jobs, so packed it in and just went to work at Virgin.
Did you enjoy the work at the record shop?
Oh, immensely. It was not just working in a record shop. It was learning about all different kinds of music, from all different kinds of genres, really. And I'd never really kind of listened to any jazz music or anything until I worked in Virgin, and the people who worked there with me at the time, they thought some kind of like Jaco Pastorius or someone like this was great. And so I ended up having to listen to that kind of music as well. But it kind of my musical education was honed through the record shop.
Well, at about this time, you're in a band with Mick Hucknall, Frantic Elevators. What was that band like?
Well, we were trying to be Mick wanted us to be a punk band, but in reality, we were more in like a new wave band than anything else. So that post-punk, if you want to call it anything. He tried to be kind of punk and stuff, but we weren't really. I mean, having kind of grown up in the kind of progressive rock era and the kind of glam rock era, our musical influences have been Bowie, Iggy, Lou Reed, but also at the same time things like Deep Purple as well. Rock bands, Led Zeppelin. All these things are kind of influenced us as well. And our band wasn't really anything. We didn't have any expectations of anything. We just wanted to just have a go and just do something.
He's had a successful career. Did you see that at the time?
No. I didn't know. For me, I just felt like I'll just do it for as long as I can do it, because I didn't really feel like I didn't really want it to be. I didn't really want to be on stage, to be honest. I wasn't so fixated by being famous or anything like that. I did it because I like making it, and Moe and stuff, and I just wanted to just be there for them for that moment, and then when my time came to kind of like pack it in, I did. I was just the bass player on loan.
Well, you work at the record shop. That's when you discovered German electronic music.
Yeah, I even discovered that before I started working at the record shop, really, like at the beginning of the 70s.
Where through
the record shop, through Virgin Record Shop. It was just a tiny little record shop in the middle of Manchester, and they'd released Virgin Records. It was a new label. They'd only had success with like Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, and then they started to branch out into different things and different like experiment with like very, very off the wall progressive bands like Camembert Electrique from Gong or something like that. And in Virgin were offering for 50 pence with a voucher from the NME a copy of the Faust tapes by this German band called Faust. Didn't really know anything about them, but it sounded very interesting, and I got the copy of that, and it was like, what is this music? It was like totally against everything that you kind of like heard in your life, up until that point. We didn't really know anything about German music.
Is that what like kind of I suppose grasped you, like that you've not heard something like that before?
Yeah, it was because it was so abstract, and because it didn't kind of adhere to the rules of rock and roll as I knew it. It wasn't trying to be a pop song. It wasn't trying to be a pop. They weren't trying to be a pop band, Faust. They were just doing something which was kind of experimental and abstract, and it kind of fascinated me that they didn't want to make a 2-minute pop song like we all did, in punk in this area, especially in the punk area. You'd gone from being like Tales of Topographic Oceans triple album to being like 2 minutes of The Damned, and it was like back then in 1970, I think it was like 72 or so when I first heard that Faust record. They had a track on it called Krautrock. So that's why they became that kind of genre of music became known as Krautrock. It was very interesting. It just kind of broadened my horizons almost instantly, and I was eager to find out more and discover more things which are happening, because Germany was unknown territory. People didn't know what kind of music came from Germany, and only later on, you sort of like in the mid-70s when disco started to appear, you had things like Boney M and Giorgio Moroder with Donna Summer. That was German music too. Amanda Lear, that was German music too, but people didn't really perceive it as such because it was it was understandable. It was sung in English.
It's all hindsight, really, but obviously it's well known you went over to Germany to discover more records and ended up staying there. But if, like, say, you had the technology now you had back then where music's just there instantly, would you ever have left Manchester?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Do you think, yeah?
Yeah, probably. Because I was intrigued by, not just the music, but by other things as well, just discovering like why and how Germans think, really. You know what I mean? It's like, there are certain things in their dark past which kind of made you wonder, like, how can humanity kind of like be up to such a point that it's able to do something like the extermination of a population of people. It was kind of like what brings people to that kind of like position somehow, and growing up as a kid in a family that had been through the war, and all my mates' families had been through the war. We were kind of curious as to like how could that happen. We certainly didn't want it to be happening in our country. How can it happen? What are the warning signs? What do you have to look out for? To see what's going to kind of guide you into that direction. Are there any? Do people just sleepwalk into it? And these things kind of interested me as well. So yeah, I suppose I would have probably like eventually decided to go and have a look.
So, like we mentioned, you didn't move to Berlin. You didn't have any intentions in the first place, though. But what was it that kept you there? Was it that just
East Germany,
by the history of it?
East Berlin kept me there, I think. When I look at it in retrospect, there was the fascination of East Germany that kind of like made me want to discover more about East Berlin, but also about East Germany, and Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, places like that. I wanted to see what they were like, see how they thought, and see what kind of music they had, because I was kind of intrigued by, like, you've got the official kind of like established music that the state kind of allows, but what's below that? What's in the cellars? What's in the underground of that kind of a regime? Are there people making music which the state doesn't approve of? I wanted to find out if that existed in East Germany at all, and if it didn't, then I would help try and create it.
You started working for Factory over in Germany, Factory Records. Did you have a connection with Factory when you lived in Manchester?
Factory didn't exist when I was back in Manchester, because it only started when I just was about to leave. I knew Tony Wilson from working in a record shop, and I knew Rob Gretton from working in a record shop. I knew Ian when he worked in a record shop, and then he could come to mine. And then, it was like the people that Peter Saville, for example, who became Factory's graphic designer, he was always a regular in the record shop. That kind of circle of friends and people that I got to know, they all, like, I met them all through the record shop. to working in that record shop. And when I came to Berlin and sort of like started to decided I wanted to stay here for a while at least. I didn't have any intention of staying here for 4 years. I thought I'd just stay here for a while and see what happens. Rob was like, "Well, now you're there, maybe you can get Joy Division a gig. Maybe you find someone who's interested in their music on the radio and stuff." And so I became their promoter, if you like, not concert promoter, like PR, if you want. And Rob would send me like boxes of records, and I'd go around to radio stations and give them records out, and people who run, send them off to magazines in the hope that they get a review. No one was interested at all. I absolutely there was no reaction whatsoever. And it was only after Ian had actually died that there was any kind of reaction at all. But even I helped to put on a concert here of Joy Division in 1918, January 1980, and I expected that at least once to see Joy Division, the Berliners would completely understand this kind of music, and it would resonate with them and their dark dystopian kind of like environment. Unfortunately, only 58 people came, so that didn't really happen either. And it was only when Tony decided he was going to do Factory Records that then I suddenly stopped being just Joy Division's promoter and became Factory Records promoter. And Tony Wilson was always trying to kind of encourage me to start up Factory Germany, but he expected me to pay for it all, and I wasn't really kind of in any kind of financial position whereby I could have done such a thing. So it never actually happened as such. But I was there, and I still am there, kind of Berlin representative, if you like.
A certain ratio will have been on it at that point. Did they get attention in Germany?
Yeah, of course. They came to Berlin and they played at SL36. Crispy Ambulance, same as well. As many factory bands as could get to come over, and people like a certain ratio, and they still get a crowd here. They got quite a loyal set of followers. Yeah.
You mentioned Ian Curtis there. Was he the first member of Joy Division that you knew?
Well, he wasn't in Joy Division when I got to know him. Joy Division exist.
Like later on down the line, I mean.
Well, I knew Bernard as well.
Yeah.
And Terry, who was their former first manager. Yeah, Terry Mason. I knew him before it really all kicked off. Yeah. It was like the whole thing was like when we Warsaw, it was a different era, of course. Like people, they were struggling. No one had given gigs.
Did they like Berlin Joy Division when they came over?
Oh yeah, they loved it. Of course. I mean, Ian and I don't often talk. We're history fans, and so we talk a lot about history, about the war. Having parents who've been in the war, like I said. So the idea, I've been to Germany hitchhiking. He'd only been to France, and I've been to Germany hitchhiking and buying records and stuff. And he wanted to know what's it like. What's it like? How are the Germans? Were you scared? And going to Berlin, it was like this is where the war had ended, and it's like so many different things. I think you've got to see it. It's like bullet riddled. And so this was couldn't wait to get over. Any excuse to get over. Rob was the one who was a bit dubious about like coming to Berlin because it was like far away. It's in the middle of East Germany. It wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy place to get to. It seems so remote from everywhere. And it was only when they got a gig in Cologne, these two Dutch promoters had sort of started, they put a tour together for Holland, and then they had one gig in Cologne. And I said, well, if you're in Cologne, you might as well come to Berlin, because if you look on the map, it's not very far. So they did.
Well, it was January you put the gig on, helped sort the gig, and he died in May. Was that the last time you seen him?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
What was he like? What?
Quiet. I mean, he was quieter than he not, because in the past he was always like a very jovial kind of guy, like playing tricks on you all the time, trying to catch you out all the time. Things you say, because he's very well read and very eloquent. But it was quite quiet. Yeah. I mean, like there was a lot going on in his mind. Put it that way. Not just the illness, his general life was a bit topsy turvy, and I just think he just didn't know how he was going to rectify anything. To be honest, I don't think it was like we'd often talked about suicide and stuff like that in the past, and he thought it was always the honourable way out, if anything. And I never thought that, to be honest. But that was Ian's take on the thing, on suicide. And then when he actually came to do that, then it was kind of obvious as that's how he'd seen it.
How and when did you find out about it, though?
The day, like the morning after it happened. I actually got a phone call from Mark Farrow, who was an old friend of mine, who'd been doing some artwork for a factory, and he phoned me up and said, "Rob phoned you." I went, "No, why?" He said, "He's on his way to America." I goes, "No, he's not. Ian's killed himself." And I just was like, "What?" And Ian's killed himself. So how did you hear that off? He said, "Rob's told me." So he said, "Rob told me not to tell you."
Why?
Well, Rob wanted, I put the phone down, and then the minute the phone put the phone down, Rob phoned me and said, "Ian's died." By that point, I couldn't believe it. It was like utterly unfathomable to me.
Did he ever mention America to you when they were over? Was that already planned when they were in Berlin, America?
No, I mean, Tony was fixated on America. It's like he wanted to break one of his bands to break in America because it meant lots of sales. If you could make America, you could generate a lot of money. Ian was just what we talked when they were making Closer. I had a chat with him, and he was telling us about, because that was when America was planned. They were going to go do some gigs in America, and he was like shitting himself about flying on an airplane because he'd never been on an airplane. He wanted to know what it's like. So I've been in the ATC as a kid and I'd flown lots of planes, and he was like, "What's it like?" He was quite apprehensive about going in the air.
Well, you knew his friend, and there was a big thing about an affair and stuff. Was that on his mind a lot at the time as well, with his ex-wife?
I dare say, yeah. I dare say it was the thing that was troubling him, as well.
Yeah.
His general health wasn't exactly in the best of. And I think it was all the stress of everything was the thing which manifested the epilepsy, really. And I think he had stress-related epileptic fits. But that's all my only personal opinion. Really. I'm not a doctor.
What about, you went out with Anika, didn't you? She was an ex-girlfriend.
Yeah, I mean, due to the situation that we've been put in with Ian, she kind of been left on the outskirts of the group, if you like, and no one really could talk to Anika, and nobody really knew her, to be honest. The band didn't really know who she was, really. Never spent any time with her much, so they didn't know who she was. And me being in Berlin, stuck in the the middle of East Germany, something, it was like we felt a bit of some kind of connection to each other. And eventually, when we started corresponding with each other and things, and we eventually became boyfriend and girlfriend over a few years. And then I got to find out a few things about her life with Ian that I hadn't kind of there's no literature at that point either. So it was quite a revelation, really.
She gets a lot of blame about the affair stuff, but she's always denied it. Did she always deny it to you as well?
What do you mean? Do you mean in what way she denied? What did she deny?
It was like a affair. They were having an affair.
She said when she first met Ian, he didn't tell her he was married. So at the beginning she had no idea that he was married. Because he got married when he was 17 or 18 or something, and it was quite a thing, to be married at such an early age. But I don't think Annie kind of saw it in that way, really. It was a situation. He told her that he was going to get a divorce and all these different things, which who knows,
Did you ever watch the film Closer?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
I thought Anton did an excellent job on Closer. He really brought the story to a point that that people needed to see a visual version of the story. And I think the way Anton Corbijn put that film together was a masterpiece. It's a beautiful film, even if like some of the things might not exactly be as they were. It doesn't matter that it's a film. But it's a very poignant film. But at the same time, it's a wonderful movie, and it gave a lot of young people really the opportunity to discover Joy Division through this movie. Like the amount of people that kind of tell you they love Joy Division, it's outstanding comparison to what it used to be. It's like 58,000 people instead of 58 people. The film has helped to generate that, because young people are very visual, and they see the pictures and they see the music and everything that goes around. Also, the situation that he finds himself in as well. Young, married, and having girlfriend, boyfriend relationships and all this kind of thing, which is everyday life, really. For most people. So it resonates with a lot of people, and I think that's the power of that movie. It's an excellent piece of work. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned he was always like playing tricks on you and stuff, and was quite witty. Have you got any special memories of him?
Well, it's just like schoolboy pranks. Schoolboy pranks. Just like if you might have said a wrong word, it'd just catch you out. It's like it's being daft, really. And they do prank. I mean, they really be pranksters. It's almost as up to the point of putting a bucket of water on the door. You know what I mean? If they've had that opportunity, they would have.
Does it seem like almost like another life that time? Really?
I don't know, really. It's just part of my life.
So did you expect New Order to carry on?
Oh yeah.
Did you?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, initially, it was like, what are they going to do? But after speaking with Rob, it was like, we're not giving up. We've got to just rethink our strategy. I knew that it would go on somehow, But the question was like, who can sing? Because like, who was going to step into the shoes of Ian Curtis? It was almost like an impossible task, That's why I was like, at that point with Bernard going, I think you have to look at like different kinds of musical genres, like look at what's going on here in Berlin, because we've got a very different music scene here, hoping that it would kind of like inspire him in some ways to go in a different direction. Because I thought if they go in the same direction, they'll always forever be compared to Joy Division. If their music sounds just like Joy Division, then everyone will just automatically compare them and say, oh, they're not as good as they were before with Ian Curtis. And I thought that if I can inspire Bernard in some way to change direction musically, because I knew he was interested in synthesizers and sequences and stuff like this, and so it was like bring him to Berlin, and he could see what I was experiencing in the Metropole at Nollendorfplatz, which was at that point it was Europe's biggest gay disco. Listen to the music that's being played here. It's like dark American, trippy, dubby kind of like disco, but not in a disco like in a 70s disco kind of style. It wasn't Tina Charles disco. This was like really dark and trippy and experimental and weird. And I try and record everything that I bought onto cassette for Bernard and give him that in the hope it would inspire him to go in a different direction. And it obviously had its made its mark.
I was going to ask you how much influence did you think Berlin had on New Order?
Immense influence, actually. But if you look at it, it had a huge influence. On Joy Division, yeah, because they made Coma Kino. That's the only thing that people know, really. But also, especially for New Order, it was a big game changer, really, coming to Berlin, and that, because Bernard needed some distance from the whole kind of like this trauma that he'd just been through, but also with the rest of the band, the same really. But bringing Bernard away from all that, as far away from that as it possibly could, I think was really important. You know, to give him some kind of insight into another kind of world that I was experiencing here, which I found very thrilling, and I thought it would be interesting for him to come here and see it as well. And he came here and saw it, but then he went to America to do some early New Order gigs, and it was a similar kind of thing, because the thing that was happening here in Berlin was just similar kind of like to what was happening in New York, and he saw it was just like in Berlin, you know, and that's how it kind of like started to kind of like go through his mind as to where to take New Order, really, in musical direction.
Well, back to you when you moved to Berlin. What was your first impression of West Germany and your first impression of East Germany when you went over there?
Well, West Germany I always thought was very prim and clean and tidy, and you know, places like Dusseldorf was all chrome and glass and all new, you know, not like Manchester, which was all old buildings everywhere. You know, this is like modern, you know, like a futuristic-y kind of feeling to it. When I got to Berlin, it was all bullet riddled and derelict and falling apart, and I thought that was much more in tune with my kind of like vision of what Berlin was like. A spy who came in from the cold kind of feeling, you know. It's like this gas lanterns and stuff, cobbled streets, you know, like this movie. Yeah, it was that, and it was like wow. And then I went to East Berlin. I only initially went just to go for the day and then come back, and I went for the day, and it was fascinating. It was like, wow, it's just like going to another planet, another world that looks like your world, but it's totally different at the same time. It was so weird. It was so, it was like going back into time somehow, going back into the like early 50s or something in a world that was like, you know, strange kind of place, and I thought I'll have to go again tomorrow, and I went then every day for about 2 weeks until these Germans started to get a bit nosy as to my, you know, why you keep going every day. Yeah.
How hard was it to get into East Germany? Like obviously you said you went every day, but is it a long process sometimes to get in?
Well, you could just go on a day visa. You could go on a day visa. You go to Checkpoint Charlie, pay 5 Deutschmarks and get a day visa, and you have to be back by midnight. So I'd do that, you know. I'd go on a day visa.
What if you stay longer? Just
well, at that point, because it was like still like late 70s, early 80s, they hadn't kind of come to that point where foreigners could apply to stay for longer. But that only happened in the latter part of the 1980s. But up until that point, it was like you paid 5 Deutschmarks, and you had to exchange 6 Westmarks 50 into East German's money. 6 marks 50, 1 to 1. That was the official exchange rate. The unofficial exchange rate was like 1 to 10. But you know, then you could go and buy yourself, you know, something to eat or something to drink. And it didn't go very far. But as from like 1980, the exchange rate had gone up to the obligatory kind of amount of money you were allowed to kind of change was 25 Deutschmarks. So it cost then to get into East Germany for the day was 30 Deutschmarks. Now 30 Deutschmarks was quite a lot of money, because considering I remember my monthly rent was 80.
Really?
Do you know what I mean? So it's quite a fair bit of cash that you have to kind of like scrape together to go over. But as I don't smoke and I don't drink and I only buy records, you know, like my overheads aren't so high, so I was able to go to East Berlin.
Well, speaking of records and music, you would smuggle punk music into East Berlin on cassettes. When did that first start?
After I started to gain a circle of friends, really. Once I started to have a little group of friends, I knew I had, you know, I could bring them something that they didn't have, you know. So I smuggled in a cassette of music that I was listening to of all the different kinds of music that I was listening to, not just of Joy Division or Sisters of Mercy or something, you know, like all the kind of music, all the different kinds of things I listen to, film music and underground American disco music, you know, all different things. So they get a wider overview of the kind of music that was available in the West that they couldn't hear on the radio, really, or see on telly. You know, music that was not commercial in that respect. I just wanted to broaden the horizons of my friends, you know.
Did you ever nearly get caught?
Not smuggling cassettes, no.
You must have been good at it then.
I don't know if it's being good at it, really. I don't look at it like that. I was just lucky that they didn't on the given days when I decided to smuggle, because I didn't smuggle every single time I went over. I didn't smuggle every time I went over a cassette or anything. But, you know, on those given days when I would, you know, I was just lucky that they didn't search me, you know. What
would have happened if you did get caught back then?
It depends, I suppose, who it is who's caught you, really. As to how much of a pest they consider you to be. You know, I could have just been, like, kicked out and never been allowed back in. Or they could have taken me somewhere else, you know what I mean? There was no way of knowing, and there was no way I wanted to know either. I wasn't in any kind of eager kind of like thrill of actually being put into an East German prison or something like that, you know what I mean?
Well, we mentioned you worked at a record shop with this smuggling cassettes into East Germany, and then you also DJ'd a lot as well. Has it always been important to like show new music to new people?
Well, I think you know, when I DJ, I only play the music that I make. I'm not a weekend DJ. You know, I'm not just playing out to crowds of thousands of people every fucking Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You know, I'm not a kind of DJ. I only play the music that I produce or make or remix or whatever, because I think it's a way for audiences to discover something that they're never going to hear normally in a club.
Yeah. Well, that's crazy smuggling their cassettes, but you went even more extreme and actually smuggled in a punk band to play a punk gig twice, actually. Can you tell us about the first one, like how it came about, the build up, and what the day was like?
Well, it was a decision that had been made after I'd performed in Czechoslovakia, a secret gig in Czechoslovakia for some Czechoslovakian dissidents. I thought, if I can do it in Czechoslovakia, then I can do it in East Berlin somehow. But it was difficult in East Berlin. It wasn't as easy as it was in Czechoslovakia, due to the fact that no one had any instruments in East Germany. It's really hard to find instruments. And as my band played with cassettes and tape loops and things like that, synthesizers and stuff, they couldn't get that. That equipment wasn't available in East Germany. But luckily, I was at that point, I was the sound engineer for a band called Totenhosen, and they were a punk band from Dusseldorf. And I said, you know, like, I've been smuggling there. They'd only had like 2 singles, and I've recorded the music onto cassette and smuggled it into East Berlin. So my friends in East Berlin, they knew the Totenhosen, they sang in German, they were a punk band. I thought, and they're easy, it's just guitars and bass and drums. I thought it'd be easier for them to play. So I asked them, would you be interested in doing a gig in East Berlin? I found a place where we can play, which was a church. The priest in the church had held these monthly blues masses, right, like church service, with usually some hippies playing "Go Tell It on the Mountain" or something. But I'd been there and asked him, would it be possible to do a gig? And he goes, it's not a gig, it's a church service. Okay, so with prayers, you have to pray, you know. We'll do it. So I managed to get. We had the location already, and then my East German friends, I got these 2 girls to find a band that could possibly provide us with the instruments, and this band was called Planlos, which means no plan in English. And they weren't allowed to play anywhere, but they were thrilled at the idea of being able to play in the church with Totenhosen. And so we did this gig, and you know, the whole gig, I'm thinking, like, the Stasi are going to come kick the door in at any moment. We actually said to the girls, only invite 30 people, no more than 30 people, because it'll keep it. We'll have an overview as to who was possibly the Stasi informer, if there is any. Yeah. I didn't really tell them that the real reason was because the Sex Pistols had only played to 30 people in Manchester when they played in June '76, and I thought that they wouldn't understand that parallel. But I wanted the same reaction from this one gig to happen throughout the whole of East Germany. It was like, inspire these kids to go to the churches and do blues masses, which is exactly what happened. So obviously, the East German authorities were kind of like curious as to my agenda.
Was there any informants within the crowd?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Every third person was a potential Stasi informer. You never knew who might be the Stasi informer. It's not like they're going to go, hey, by the way, don't tell anyone but I'm an informer for the Stasi. You didn't really do that.
Did you ever find out who it was though? Like which ones it were?
Kind of, yeah. Kind of. I do know now, yeah. But yeah, so there's a lot of things left unanswered, unfortunately.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm not allowed to see all my Stasi files, so I won't know for sure. I don't know why they won't let me. There's no explanation as to why. So
is that not like? Should you be allowed to see your files?
Well, I've seen a portion of my file, which is what they kind of dig up every time I ask to see the rest of it. They kind of give me the bit they've already seen. But I know that my file was. I was told it was big. The bit I got to see was rather big, and then when I came to ask for photocopies of my file, I got 34 pages, and I'm like, "Where's the rest?" Oh, well, we'll do the rest later, and I never saw it ever. And I've never seen it since. But they know that I actually got to see originally when I got to see my Stasi file in 1999. I actually got to see 84 pages of my Stasi file. So 50 pages has suddenly disappeared, and the rest of it is somewhere hiding, lingering amongst the files in the Stasi archive somewhere.
What are you allowed to say? What was on it, or what you expect?
Well, it took them 10 years to put my file together. From the minute I applied to see my Stasi file, it took them 10 years to put it together. They don't really want to put that amount of work back into looking for the rest of my Stasi file. I don't think. Yeah.
What would you expect to be on that though? Is there anything you'd expect that you have not seen?
I have no idea. I mean, I did a lot of things in East Germany. I went over with British Television twice. So I did these illegal concerts with the Toten Halls, and I did I met quite a few people. I was involved in quite a lot of things, and to get to see your Stasi file that kind of just gives like very, very mundane information. It's like, yeah, it's like I'm a foreigner. I'm a Westerner. I'm not coming from Bulgaria or from Russia. I'm a Westerner coming from a capitalist, imperialist, NATO country, and their first initial questions are like, "What's his agenda? Who's he working for?" Every single time I went into East Germany, it was registered with the authorities. If nothing else, there should be a list of all the times I went into East Berlin, but there's not even that. You know what I mean? It's like I've got like 3 or 4, and there's no mention of doing the TV programs or anything. And I know that we had a Stasi minder as we were doing the TV program, someone who was hovering around all the time, taking notes. There's nothing. I've got none of that. So I don't know what's in there. I don't know what they were thinking. They were making it up as it went along, because they had no idea about what my thoughts were, what my intentions were. Of course, I just wanted to make my friends happy. Yeah, they couldn't get their heads around that. Yeah.
This is a bit later on, but the GDR, did they get you to produce an album so the Stasi could keep an eye on you or something?
Basically, yeah. Basically, it was that. I mean, like I'd started going over with the US Army, and they were very curious as to what that was all about. And so then suddenly I was, asked if I'd produced this East German new wave band. There were people who I knew, and I'd seen the band perform and stuff. I knew who they were, been to their house and stuff. And it was like they were also, for the second Totenhausen gig that we did, they were the band that provided the instruments, the drums and the bass and stuff. And they were called Division and The Vision, yeah. And they had been given the opportunity to make a record for the Amiga, the state-owned record label. And it was like the Amiga, it was for them, it was either we either signed them to our label or we banned them. That was the authorities' kind of question. Now, if we ban them and make them an illegal band, then they'll have will be uncontrollable following that we won't be able to control. Whereas if we sign them to the label, then we can control their output and control what they do. So they signed Division to the state-owned record label Amiga, and then the Amiga then wanted me to produce their record so they could sit and watch me and see what my agenda was.
So when you're there, did you constantly feel like you were being watched?
Not really, no. Not really. I mean, I knew that somewhere around me in my circle of friends or whatever, there must be somebody, because, there must be somebody who's doing the informing. You don't know who. You just have to kind of like trust that they're not the ones and don't tell them so much. And the same was in the studio, I didn't really realise that in the studio nearly everybody was informing on everybody else. Yeah. It was like, like I said, you didn't kind of like brag about it if you were a Stasi informer. You were just there. And I'd stop work and go out in the night or whatever. They want to know where I'd gone. What did you do last night? Where did you go? Who did you meet? Kind of like like over a cup of coffee and a sandwich in the morning. You know what I mean? It's like, what did you do last night?
What did they think you like, a spy or something?
No, I don't know. I know it's not that at all. No. The East German authorities thought I was out to corrupt the youth of East Germany, which was entirely right. Their assumption, actually. I was in a way. I just wanted to provide my circle of friends with alternative music and give them a kind of a wider perspective as to what life in the West was like, but also understand the humour and the absurdity of their own political system that they were living in, and trying to kind of give them kind of like ways around kind of the obstacles that the situation that they're in provided, like not being able to perform and not being able to do this and do that. So how do you get around those obstacles and kind of, bend the rules a little bit and bend the rules a little bit more and bend the rules a little bit more and kind of like invigorate their enthusiasm, I suppose, and kind of like give them something to some kind of vocation, like doing these secret concerts or making a record or whatever. It just kind of like it's just a way of trying inspiring people to kind of.
The Stars and stuff hated punk, didn't they? Like, they were.
I don't know about hating punk. It was more like they didn't understand it. Of course, you're talking about the Stasi people in the Stasi who were in the actual secret service. These aging men who most of them had been in the war at some point, or in the Hitler Youth or whatever. They're all in their 50s, 40s, late 40s and 50s and stuff. They didn't understand this music at all anyway. They didn't understand youth culture. They didn't understand anything. They didn't understand this freedom of thought idea. It's like a completely different mindset altogether. So punk, just as progressive rock music, punk, hippies, all these different, they had like a drawing, like a table of how to spot the goth or the skinhead, so that the East German Stasi operative would know, that's a punk and that's a goth and that's a skinhead and that's a hippie. And then they could put them into their particular categories that they kind of like carved out for them. They just didn't understand what it was. And punk music, they really rather forbid it rather than kind of embrace it. The myth was that punk had been born out of the working class and the struggle that the working class had and stuff. You'd have thought that in the working and farmer state of East Germany they would have embraced that that punk music, just like in contrast, like Poland did. They embraced punk in a completely different way because, you know, we had Solidarność, the trade union movement, going on strike and changing the political landscape of Poland. And punk music was just seen as a part of a musical kind of expression of that. But these Germans were having none of it. You know, it was anything that wasn't deemed okay by the state was considered subversive and forbidden.
We spoke about the first illegal gig. The second one didn't really go to plan as such, did it?
Well, we got there and we arrived at the gig. You know, we said it'll be the same as the first one. Only invite 30 people. Don't invite more than 30 people. But no one could keep the trap shut this time around because, you know, it's like, hey, there's going to be a secret gig happening. Don't tell anybody. You know, when we arrived there, there's already like about 250 people, something like that, maybe 300 people. And it was like, well, very obviously people couldn't keep their mouth shut, you know. And the police are sitting outside. And we'd arrived there. I went there with the Toten Hosen on the underground, and some other English friends, they'd gone with my friend in his car, his American soldier in his car. And because he'd been smuggling the guitars in his car. And he said, I can't get out of the car. If I get out of the car, I've had contact with East Germans, because as an American soldier, you're not allowed to have contact with East Germans. So he could only watch the gig from his car. Whereas everybody else was, you know, went in, and the priest said, well, the police have told me that the Toten Hosen can't play. Oh, yeah, okay. So tell the people that the Toten Hosen can't play. But tell the people then also that a band from Dresden is going to play in the place of the Toten Hosen. And he's like, what band from Dresden? I said, a band from Dresden. So the Stasi don't know what the Toten Hosen look like. So, and he was like, you crazy Englander. and then the Toten Hosen played as a band from Dresden for 45 minutes, and then the police came and, okay, now we know that's the Toten Hosen. We got to stop. And we expected loads of trouble, but there wasn't. They just allowed the concert to kind of fizzle out, and people kind of drifted off, you know. It was only weeks later than the Stasi started going around to my friends' houses and started going through all the stuff.
Didn't one of the band's girlfriends get arrested or something?
I don't know about that, to be honest. I can't remember that.
No, I watched a documentary, what was it called? About the two gigs.
Oh, you mean the Ausfahrtspiel? Yeah.
Yeah. And I swear one of them said his girlfriend.
No, they all got searched and stuff. They all got put under quite a lot of pressure. It was before that, after the first gig that happened, I think. Yeah, not after the second gig. After the second gig, things were starting to get a bit more relaxed in East Germany, musically speaking. You know, the government were kind of trying to make things a little bit more easier, I suppose.
You weren't there when the Berlin Wall came down, were you?
No, I wasn't. I unfortunately missed this magnanimous event. I left the night before.
Why were you?
I went on tour on a road trip with with some English friends. This guy called Trevor Wilson, who had a magazine called Ich and mein Staubsauger, which means me and my vacuum cleaner. And it with him and another writer called Dave Rimmer, who wrote Like Punk Never Happened and Once Upon a Time in the East. And I decided, I talked him into like going to Romania for our holidays. And so I said to the guys at the Amiga studios, I'll record everything, and then I'll take a short break, and then I'll go on my holidays and then come back. And then we can produce the record to the end. And so, and said, where are you going on holiday? They were thinking I was going to go to Spain or Portugal or something. And I was like, I'm going to Romania. And they were like, oh, why would you want to go there? You know, what are you going there for? You know, because I've been to Romania. I thought it was quite interesting. And they couldn't believe it, like, why would you want to go to, anyone would want to go to Romania, especially in November 1989. And so we embarked on our tour, on our road trip, and ended up we were in Krakow. But we had no idea that the Berlin Wall had come down. No one found out like 10 days later or something like that, when we were in Hungary, near to the Romanian border, in Hungary, that the wall had come down.
Do you regret not being there?
Well, it's not really regret. I mean, I don't regret anything. I was disappointed that I'd missed this magnanimous event. The single most kind of like historical event that could happen to Berlin. I'd missed it. I was a bit disappointed that I'd missed it. But in retrospect, though, I got to see Nicolae Ceausescu's Romania in November 1989, just before their revolution. And on the way back, I caught the Czech Revolution, the Velvet Revolution on Wenceslas Square, where my friends who'd been all dissidents and fighting against the communist government, if you like, in Czechoslovakia, suddenly became free men and were able to, stand on the balcony together with Václav Havel and Alexander Dubček. It was quite a thrill. So
when you get back to Berlin, and obviously the walls come down, what was that like when you first came back?
It was like coming back to another city entirely.
Yeah,
it was like another world entirely. It was like the West Berlin was teeming with Trabants and Stonewall jeans, and the whole kind of city vibe had kind of like become something else. It had relaxed suddenly. It was as if like this big weight had been lifted off its shoulders. This depressive kind of like spectre of thermonuclear holocaust had kind of been lifted from the shoulders, and everyone was smiling and happy and optimistic, and it was like, just really, 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 really a really optimistic feeling. It was really, really nice feeling. It wasn't like what's going to happen next. It was like, okay, this part is now it's ended, and something new is going to begin. Yeah.
Techno then exploded, then, did it? Not long after.
Yeah, because Techno in West Berlin was just a group of about 150 people in one club, whereas all these kids in East Germany and East Berlin, really, they'd been listening to the radio, listening to like people talking about acid house and stuff, and they wanted to have that feeling. What's it like to go to an acid house party? They had no idea. They had no concept of what it could even be. They'd heard the music on one radio show a week, where on a Friday night, where Monika Dietl would play like all her sort of club music. So they had a bit of an idea this is the sort of thing which is happening in West Berlin, but they thought there was like a big scene. They had no idea that it was just one club. They thought it was like loads of things happening. So when the wall came down, they all went to this one UFO club in West Berlin, and it was like, is this it? It's that size of a flipping shed, So there's loads of derelict places empty places in East Berlin. Let's do parties there, and so that's why it exploded the way it did, because all of these Easter kids then wanted something which was not state owned, not something that had been dictated to them by the state. The music prior to that, coming from the Amiga, was all state sanctified music. They wanted something which had nothing to do with that, and Techno just kind of gave them exactly what they wanted. It was new. It was new to everybody, really. It was new. Had no difficult to understand English lyrics, because nobody spoke English in East Germany. They only learned Russian at school. So all these elements which kind of like brought it together, and the fact that they for the first time in their lives they could take drugs, so they would take ecstasy and then go to these parties. It was like an incredible experience for them, and it was a new experience for everybody, and that's why it became so popular. And the focus of modernity moved from like the UK and America, moved to Berlin suddenly. It was like techno. It might have been, conceived in Detroit through Juan Atkins and Derek May and people like that, but it had been born through the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fact that thousands of Easter kids could come and kind of join this techno bandwagon, really. And it was thrilling, yeah. Really.
Well, we mentioned obviously you took the music into East Berlin and the illegal gigs. When the wall came down and everybody like mixed together, did you see that like? I know you mentioned techno was the big thing then, but did you see the thing of punk music and the music you was taking over? Sort of, do you see the influence that you left on
Oh
the?
yeah, I mean, like, for my friends, I didn't just only take punk music, and I took all kinds of music that I was listening to. I was listening to like high energy music before it became known as high energy. I was recording that onto cassettes. That's the stuff that kind of it influenced Bernard Sumner as much as it influenced my friends in the East. It's like the same cassette, basically. And I could see how that kind of like what kind of repercussion it had on my friends and their friends and their friends' friends and their friends' friends. Kind of, like the cassette would be passed around and copied and passed around and copied. And I could see that was the influence back then, but also suddenly having this new form of music suddenly appear. It was just like a progression of that, really. I mean, the whole mindset was also a progression.
But then punk gigs still a sort of go down in history still. I don't know, they still get spoken about.
Yeah, because they were the beginnings, really. They were the beginnings of pushing the boundaries out. How do we? The city's surrounded by a wall. Everything's about boundaries, and it's about questions like how far can we push these boundaries within that confine of the wall. And I think that the punk things being the earliest. Like the earliest thing that happened, really, that created that, which is important, I think, now. At the time, I didn't really think how important it was. But in retrospect, I realised that, I thought loads of people were doing this kind of thing all the time. I didn't realise that no one had ever done it before. It was only after, when the wall come down and you start to hear other people's issues, you realise, oh dear, what we did there was actually quite a unique thing,
It don't really get more punk than that, really, does it?
Well, for me, the punks in East Germany were always the real punks. They were always the ones who, like the punk in the 70s in the UK was very fashionable. Sex Pistols were on EMI. It was a major record label. If they'd been on some indie label, it would have been completely different. This whole thing that Vivienne Westwood had a fashion shop, and that the Sex Pistols were her models for her clothing. It was always about fashion and modernity in that respect. Whereas in East Germany, being a punk was actually being very, very daring, going against the state's wishes, breaking those boundaries that the state had kind of like put around you. It was very, very, very authentic in its punk attitude. It wasn't about violence. It wasn't about destroying anything. It was about change. It was about breaking the chains of monotony and boredom. And that was the really important thing about East German punk for me. It's like helping to be able to enthuse that and, let them not give up hope. If we do these things, they won't give up hope. I just wanted them to know that there was somebody who thought about them on the other side of the wall, that they hadn't been forgotten.
In 1990, you started your own record label, Masterminded for Success. That had a huge role in trance music, didn't it?
Well, that was an idea, really, that I just had. I wanted to make... my idea was to make sort of like Tangerine Dream and Klaus Schulze with some kind of like techno beat, with a bit of Wagner added to make it emotional. That was my kind of idea for what I considered to be called hypnotic trance music. And I started my record label purely because I had the opportunity to be able to do so. Suddenly the Amiga was no longer the state-owned record label. They could do something new, and I said, well, why don't you do something new like techno, because that's really new. All the kids in the East will love you for doing that, and they will. We don't know anything about it, so if you know so much about it, why don't you do it? So that's exactly what I did. And so I did it, and I called my record label Masterminded for Success, because I wanted to keep the three letters MFS, which actually mean Ministerium für Staatssicherheit, which is the Ministry for State Security, abbreviated meaning Stasi. So I wanted to make T-shirts with MFS on the back just to wind up people. I needed an excuse, so I created a record label to be able to do that for
it. So how did the trance music come about then?
Well, I just had this idea, like I said, this is what I wanted it to be. And, you had techno, hard techno. I wanted something that was a bit more chill out, a bit kind of like, what do you do when you go home after you've been out all night and you read up, I wanted something which is a bit more hypnotic and a bit more kind of like to help you to come down from your party evening, and so I kind of like planted this seed, if you like, into some of the young Berlin artists that were lying around in Berlin, and see what come out of it. Let them interpret that whatever way they want. And that's what it ended up becoming, some version of trance of sorts, and took on its own life because as things do, one replicates the next, and another wants to do that the same, so they kind of take that to another level, and eventually it became too cheesy in the end. It became too like music by numbers.
Yeah.
And I lost, and it lost its abstractness and its kind of like emotional kind of aspect about it. The initial reason for doing that kind of music was to kind of tap into the feeling of euphoria that Germans were feeling. They'd won the World Cup, the wall had come down, your reunification was on the cards. I wanted it, like all these different things. I want, the feeling of taking ecstasy for the first time. I want to put all that into music, into a musical idea, and I also wanted to be able to find something which I could take to other places outside of Germany, because only Germany, or rather Berlin, had experienced the fall of the Berlin Wall. Nowhere else had. So they didn't understand techno. People in the UK certainly didn't. It was like you had the Happy Mondays and the Stone Roses and the Spiral Carpets playing rave music, but you didn't, that had been born out of sort of acid house, but it wasn't techno. In America, even though techno had been conceived in Detroit, there was no place for people to play there. So to bring that, kind of develop that and sort of like make it a bit more melodic and a bit more kind of understandable, I thought maybe we can bring this electronic sound to other places like South America, USA, Asia, whatever. Just see how it went, and then eventually, once they'd kind of got through their kind of initiation of listening to trance, they might turn towards listening to what proper techno's like. And if they come to Berlin today, they can go to some place like Berghain or whatever and just experience what it's like to be in a proper kind of like techno club.
Did you come back to England much and during that time and see the music that was going on?
Not that much. I only come like a couple of times a year or whatever to the UK.
More just like to see family and stuff? Mostly
to see my family, yeah.
What?
Not really to go out, not unless there was something really super special or something that I could go to. Not normally. It wasn't just to go out, to go to the Hacienda or something. Yeah. I would come over to England to see my parents and my sister.
Did you ever miss England while you were over there? Was there ever a point where you wanted to come back now?
No. Like there's things I miss about England, of course, but I don't. It's not enough for me to want to live there.
Yeah. When you first went to Berlin, did it take a lot of time to settle in?
Excuse me. No, it didn't. No, it was like I felt almost at home instantly somehow. Yeah. And I wanted to learn German, so I thought if I'm going to stay here for any length of time, I need to, especially I want to go to East Berlin, where no one speaks English. I had to learn some German so that I could actually have a conversation and try and speak to people. I wanted to know things about East Germany, about Eastern German life and the mindset. What's it like living in a communist country? What's it like being surrounded by all this kind of like environment? And how do you speak to someone? If you can't speak the language. So I made it a vocation really to learn German. So the minute I started to grasp a few words, I felt at home instantly.
You had international DJ Paul Van Dyk on your record label, and you discovered him. Really, what was it like working with him?
Yeah, it was a challenge as well as being a thrill, I suppose. Because Paul, when I was introduced to him, I'd been working with another artist called Cosmic Baby, who was a guy from Nuremberg area of Germany, and he'd made a few house records and stuff, and I proposed to him that we do a project together as Cosmic Baby, and I gave him my trance directive and let him just get on with it. But the DJs were saying, although they liked the music, they couldn't play the tracks because they weren't compatible to what a DJ required, apparently. And so I said to Cosmic, you should be looking for a DJ who'll tell you what he needs as a DJ. And he was playing in a club one night, and he said, I think I found a guy. So I said, I'll bring you into the office. And that kid was Paul Van Dyk. And so they went together in the studio and made a track called Perfect Day. And their project name was The Visions of Shiva. Very esoterical. And they did that. They did 2 singles. And then Cosmic wanted to go his own way, and Paul had to go his own way. Paul didn't really know anything really at that point about how to make music. He was a kid from the East, he was an Eastie kid, but he was exactly the right person. He was the type of person that I'd envisaged on having my record label anyway, because I'd set my record label up primarily to attract kids from East Germany. I wanted MFS to be the place where kids from East Germany who had any ideas about making music, they could come to me and discuss their project idea, and I put them in the studio and maybe make a record with them. So MFS was the first independent East German record label, really. But then, as if you look at like the former Amiga also being as an independent record label, they gave me the kind of like support, and I was able to use their facilities to be able to create a label properly. And then Paul comes along, and I said to him, you can do a remix for this band called Hugh, mate, that I'd signed. And after that, his career suddenly started to take off as a remixer. People thought it was great and wanted to have more and more and more. And and it starts to expand itself. It's a thrill. You can see the objectives that you set yourself being realised. And his dream, his dream was to be a DJ. Really, he didn't really, his dream wasn't to be just a carpenter or something. It was like he wanted to be a DJ. And I said to him, if you want to do this, I want to have 100% commitment. I'm going to give 200%. I want at least 100% commitment from you. If you guarantee that you're going to try your best 100% to be the best DJ in the world, then I'll do it. Because I'm not interested if you're only thinking about being second best. You have to try to be the best. And he said, I'll do it. And so I tried to, get him to that point where he could be that. Of course, in this horrible world of the music business where people don't think about themselves, things kind of like, eventually got to a point where Paul didn't need me anymore, and therefore I was ostracized out of his plan of being a global dominating superstar DJ. But that's part of what it is, really, and it's like, there's nothing you can do about that. I can't make someone be loyal to me and stay with my record label forever if it's not in them.
Yeah, you're not going to beg for a mistake.
You know what I mean? It's like, if he wants to go, then go. Then go your own way. I'm not gonna chain you and keep you as part of my label if you don't want to be here. If you think you're good enough to go it alone, and please do so. I've done my part. The thrill's in the chase.
Yeah.
Once it's all been done and dusted, people look at Paul Van Dyk, they don't know anything about his early career. They only see him as being sort of like a megastar DJ or whatever. But the history, how he got there, that's all mine.
Was that hurt then, in a way? I know it probably doesn't now, but did it when he first left?
No, it's just disappointing. It's disappointing that people look at money as being the only objective and not wanting to kind of like divide that equally amongst people. And for me, that was never the objective. You know, the objective was to create something interesting and have something with longevity that would last over decades, that people would be able to reflect upon and do something which had some kind of substance to it, culturally substance, like invigorating, inspiring other people. I said to Paul Van Dyk, what you become, what you are representing all of the kids in East Germany, being an international DJ on the world stage. Paul didn't want to have anything to do with the East German background. He would refuse to kind of like acknowledge that he was East German. And I was like, you've got to tell people you're from the East. It's the most interesting part about you. There are no East German DJs on the international stage. You are it, and all those kids in the East are going to look up to you. I want to show them that if you can do it, they can do it. You know, and then, you know, obviously it's a point where it's like he got to a point where I was no longer required. You know, and yeah, it was a bit disappointing. Yeah, of course it was, because I didn't do it for those reasons. That's the only reason. You know.
In your B-movie documentary, which I think is brilliant, there's a part where, I can't remember, there's a guy from a German band, was it on the Tube, with blonde spiky hair?
Fahr in Urlaub, which means, in German, fahr in Urlaub, which means to go on holiday. Yeah. Oh, it's just a play on words. It's a play on words. Yeah. And that's from the Tube, that scene, yeah, with Muriel Gray in the cafe. Yeah.
And he's talking about how it's hard for Germans to make it big worldwide, or even in the UK, really. And then Nina comes along with 99 Red Balloons and kind of changes that.
It was all against. I mean, I didn't agree with him. You know, I said like Kraftwerk sang in German. You know, yeah, it's like that's what he believed at that moment. You know, he thought that it was difficult for him at that particular moment to make that kind of music in German, because his music is, and the lyrics are very, very playful. So, you know, if you don't understand them, then you don't understand the irony, and that's what he really meant, really, about that.
I was going to say though, like, have you seen how hard it is for German acts to come through? Like, obviously, Paul Van Dyk went like worldwide massive, but have you seen how hard it is for other acts and bands?
Well, you know, being the difference between being a band and being a DJ is that the music, when you're a DJ, the music you're playing has already been made by somebody else.
Yeah, you know? That's what I'm saying. So,
you know what I mean? So it's not exactly the same as being in a band and writing the lyrics and trying to make a statement and all these different things as you get when you're actually in a band. Yeah. So it's a slightly different thing. And especially the fact that you know, the music that Paul Van Dyk was actually playing out, most of it was instrumental.
Yeah.
You know, they weren't any difficult to understand lyrics. That's the whole point of that genre of music, techno and trance, is the fact that most of it was instrumental. There weren't any songs. They were just pieces of music, which kind of kicked off, and you went to the next one that kicked off, and then the next one. You know, it's like it's a different kind of like musical sound, really, and to a band that has lyrics and kind of like 2-minute song or whatever, 3-minute song. It's a whole different ball game entirely. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. Because he was saying, yeah, like you said with the lyrics, that he's saying a German accent, it's harder, but if you're a DJ, like you say, it's mainly instrumental, isn't it? Well, it was for Paul Van Dyk,
yeah.
You've done some remixes yourself. Do you enjoy doing that?
I love doing remixes. Yeah, I love that. So it's a great experience to interpret somebody else's music and try and put your own stamp on it at the same time. You know, I try not to destroy what it is that they've created. You know, I try and just reinterpret it the way I feel that it should be if I was going to be making their song. What's
life like for you these days in Berlin?
It's not really changed much since before, to be honest. Yeah, you know, I'm still doing the same thing as I did before. I'm still trying to make, music and do soundtracks or make the remixes for people. I still do that. That's what I do. It's becoming increasingly difficult, of course, because there's the way our culture is considered by most governments is that it's invaluable. It's like, it doesn't have any worth. It's and so they'd rather put money into other sectors, whereas without culture we'd have nothing.
Yeah, it's the same all over the world, really, like that.
It's the same everywhere. Yeah. It's like the people who are in power, who are the one who hold the purse strings, tend to want to put the money in things which they think that will enhance their income, whereas the cultural aspect is another income stream, and one where people are willingly, you give the people the money to be able to spend on things, and they're going to spend it on things like concerts and cinema and theatre, entertainment of sorts. It comes back to them in better ways, but they prefer to cut that income stream off and just concentrate on buying weapons or something, selling weapons or something. It's for me, it's unfathomable,
Well, it showed after COVID when all the arts were the last things to open up, and it had the least priority, did it?
It had the least priority, and it's like, yeah, they gave other people their own opportunities to make money out of that. People like Spotify and stuff like that, they were the ones who were able to make the most money out of the government's incompetence.
Yeah.
On the cultural level, It's like, let's give it all away. Let's give away our cultural heritage. That's the kind of attitude which I don't understand. And it's like, it's not creating anything at all.
Yeah, definitely. Well, what have you got planned for the future with the music? Is there anything coming up, or?
Well, I don't like talking about unlaid eggs, especially as eggs in America are very expensive these days. It's quite precious, the thing that I've got to say. But next up, actually, I've done a couple of remixes over the past couple of months, and well, they're going to be seeing the release over the next couple of months. And then I did a restoration of a film soundtrack, and I compiled together for the special edition CD of a box set for a film called On the Silver Planet. Na Srebrnym Globie is called in Polish, and that is being released in America on Mondo, and that is going to be a special edition box set with a Blu-ray and a book and the CD of the score for the film, which I'd restored with my partner Michelle Adam and compiled as a CD so it could be part of the box set. So that's coming out sometime this year, in the next couple of months. So there's quite a few things happening.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining me. Have you ever thought about writing a book? It is an interesting life you've had.
A lot of people ask me that, but it's not a question of me writing a book. It's a question of having it published, really. I could write a book, but what am I going to do with it? I don't know any publishers.
Oh, really?
If anyone who has a publishing company would be interested in releasing my experiences, then obviously I would think about writing a book, because what's the point of me doing it if no one's going to publish it? I'm not going to just put it up on the internet.
Yeah. Well, you have, like we've mentioned in the video, you have influenced music in Germany. You've had a massive influence on a lot of kids growing up. Like you said, with the East German things, taking music over there and bands, and that's gone through the generations, really. So, it's still getting talked about now. So it's great to see.
Yeah, I'm very proud that it's finding its, getting some kind of positive reaction to all after all these decades. Because when I think about, when I look back in my teenage years, working in Virgin Records in Manchester, I'd bring records on to listen to, but I wouldn't just listen to them on my own. I'd get my mates round and say, let's listen to this. And you'd listen to something like Gong or something like this. It's like, and we'd all sit around and chat about what the record was about and what the meaning of it was about. It went from that to today, really, and I'm very happy that young people, other generations, are finding they can get answers out of what it is that we did, and that's important. That they can find that it'll inspire them to do something for the future, for their future. Because a lot of kids, after seeing B movie, they say to me, "Oh, I wish I lived in the '80s." I'm saying, "Well, you're actually living in a kind of '80s really now, really, because it's a similar kind of situation. There's loads of strikes and there's loads of there's not so much work going around. There's all these kind of things that happen in late 70s, early 80s kind of scenarios which are happening. We've got a threat of nuclear holocaust back over our heads. We've got all these things which we had in the 80s. So it's now up to you to make the music that will replicate right now, in an audible way. And fuck it, really, because you don't know how long you're gonna be. So do it while you got the opportunity. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, definitely. What is your personal favourite highlight then in your life? Is it that first gig, putting on that first gig in East Berlin?
I can't really say actually what my personal highlight is.
Or proudest moment?
Apart from marrying my wife, you mean?
Well, yeah.
No, you know what I mean. It's like there's yeah. I mean, there's lots of different little things. I mean, like doing podcasts like this and being interrogated and asking all these questions. You've got to think about what did you do? And I'd never really thought about it in the past. I'd just done it and just kind of forgot about it. Went on to the next thing, do the next thing, and do the next thing. And for me, it's just a question of like, I've got my own kind of like objective. I like making film music. I like, movies and stuff, doing these kind of things, not because I think I can make loads of money out of it, but because I think it's an interesting, challenge, really. And I think find life is constantly challenge.
Is that what drives a challenge? Like,
yeah,
sure. That was a challenge, really.
Yeah. It's like life's too fucking boring, without a challenge. Like doing, if everything's dead easy, then it's like really boring.
Yeah.
I like to have something that can confront, and not in a hostile way, but like okay, this is something that I've got to. How do I get around this problem? Like work it out. Is there a way around this problem? And when is it time to adhere and kind of like for the moment, just kind of like go with the flow, and then find the moment when you can go through the gap that's like suddenly appears in front of you. All these little things which kind of like drive me, really.
Yeah, it's like you were saying before, with you changed things for East Germans without violence, and that's important as well, isn't it? Like you did it.
Yeah, it was all through like love of music.
Yeah, it's weird how music can bring everybody together just from any background.
It's unlike anything else, really. It's like it doesn't matter when you're on the dance floor. It doesn't matter how much money you make, what kind of car you drive, or where your ethnicity, where you're from, what kind of what's your sexuality. It doesn't fucking matter if you're in a club, and that's been like that forever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like everyone can be together in the same kind of environment, all connected together because of the music. And I think that's a wonderful feeling, and the feeling that we had in the late 80s and early 90s when we had acid house parties and techno parties in the East, especially after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Everyone was together. It didn't matter whether you were from East to West. It never mattered.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's a good note to finish on, that music is a thing that can bring everybody together. Like you said, no matter how different you are from the next person, as long as there's music there, we can all join together.
Yeah, and let's hope we can, forge a new future with a new sound.
Yeah. What are you listening to at the moment? What's getting your attention at the moment?
Well, there's one band that I really, really like that I've been kind of promoting a little bit. They're just mates, but they've got a couple of great albums out. They're called Twin Noir.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, they sing in German, but they're a duo, two punks and a tape machine. They're really good. And I've been recently listening to a group from Japan called The Roots, which is they made a surf album of Joy Division songs, which is excellent. And we invited them to the gig in Tokyo. And they've done Kraftwerk and they've done Buzzcocks. Some cover version albums, but they're done in a kind of like twangy guitar surf way, and they're very entertaining. Been listening to that recently as well, and a couple of other things.
Is there a music scene in Germany at the moment? What's popular there now?
Well, there is, same as it is in the UK. It's a bit kind of like diverse.
Yeah,
you know, there's no real outstanding thing where you can go like, oh, it's that. I think that the Twin Noir lads, they're at least doing something a little bit kind of reminiscent of a past thing, in a sense. It's like retro modern almost, but at the same time their attitude is very today, and I think there's quite a lot of bands like that actually around who are just the true underground of Berlin. Is not not Berghain, where you've got like a queue of 8 hours to get in. It's like it happens in these little places, the grubby cellars of the city, and so you have to look at, like, there's a place here called Slaughterhouse, which is so it's been going for years. Slaughterhouse for 20 years, over 30 years almost, and it is a former slaughterhouse, and it's great. It's great for that kind of music, like if you're young and you've kind of got something to say, you go to the Slaughterhouse. That's where it's happening.
Yeah. Like is it an independent sort of club as well? Then, like,
yeah, of course, yeah. It's not chrome and shiny, You can't go there in your high heels,
Yeah,
it's a good looking place, but it's got attitude. Yeah.
That's something that's lacking in England, really. In the UK, they're all the small music venues and stuff closing down over here, which is obviously a problem.
Yeah, but one door closes, another one opens.
Yeah,
that's the way you have to look at it. It's like, the club that has been established for such a long time suddenly has to close its doors. Then the people who are kind of whining about, like, oh, you make a new club. If you make your own version of whatever it is and do it. You don't have to do it forever. Just do it for a few years. I mean, when I was younger, club wouldn't last longer than 3 years.
Really?
It closed and then someone else had opened. Especially here as well in Berlin. The first SO36 only lasted for like 3 gigs, and then it was closed. And then it became another club opened called Excess, and that was there for 2 years, and then it closed. And then SO36 reopened because the people who really wanted SO36 to continue decided they wanted to continue it. So, it's been like that in Berlin forever almost. Yeah. It's only now that we have like 2 really established clubs like the Berghain and Tresor. Tresor was the first techno club in Berlin, really, and it's like, without those kind of institutions that bring focus to the city and the city's musical development, without those, like all the rest of the clubs, they're all transitional.
Yeah. You've done a lot of music management, bands, recording and remixing, and like a lot. Did you ever think of opening like a club?
No.
No
way. It's not for me. It's definitely not for me now. Yeah. I like going to clubs. I need something to, if I did a club, then I'd have nowhere to go to.
Yeah, true.
Because you see it then from a completely different viewpoint, and I like being able to go out to some place, at least. I mean, I work in all the other realms of music or whatever, but like at least I can go out to a club.
Yeah, the club's the only break you get from it, and then you're working in a club, and it's like, yeah.
Don't think so. Yeah.
Well, like I say, thank you for joining on the podcast. It's been great to hear your stories and your life experiences. It's been an honour to speak to you.
Thank you. I'm glad you found something. Hopefully you'll get something out of it.
Yeah. You've not got a lot of like, what's the word?
Likes.
Like interviews and information about you out there, so you do learn new stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I never, never wanted to be on the platform or anything. It's
Yeah.
just, it's just happened to be that way that you find yourself there, and it's good that there's something for people to discover. I think, because everything is online. Everything you can read about everybody. You know what colour my bloody underpants are. If I was a superstar, you'd know what I have for my breakfast. You know what I mean? It's like it's almost everything is there. Whereas like, not that like the film not being available everywhere. The music is on, scattered amongst different platforms. My Bandcamp, or a bit on Spotify, a bit on YouTube. Or records, only on records. It's like it gives people a challenge to seek it out. And if they're interested, they can go and find it because it's out there.
Yeah, it goes back to the needing a challenge to keep life interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you again. It's been great to speak to you.
All the best, man.
You too. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.